Hello and welcome to the New Business Masterclass series sponsored by business development platform The Advertist, helping you find your next new client. My name is Keith Smith, and among other responsibilities, I am the Managing Director of The Advertist and I'm also the host of the business development podcast Fuel. As such, every day I get to speak to experts in the business of finding new clients for creative PR, advertising, marketing and digital agencies. The New Business Masterclass series is my own personal selection of the cream of the crop. Experts who have offered to share their own insights and experiences in the world of new business and business development to help you if you're just starting out in the industry and need a few pointers, or if you work in or own your own agency and need to give your new business a fresh makeover.
The world of agency new business is a very time-consuming one, and as the old saying goes, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. But do you? You can save a lot of time and effort finding your prince if you go about identifying the prospects that will give you the best chance of success. In this episode, we meet Ben Potter. Ben is a business development advisor who works with agencies to help them streamline their new business process, and one of the key features of his work is his skill in helping agencies identify and qualify the right prospects to chase. Properly qualifying new prospects and then holding those all-important discovery meetings will help anyone in sales and new business massively improve their success rate. So grab a notebook and pen and get ready for a quick lesson in how to develop a successful discovery process for your agency with Ben Potter.
So I'm going to talk to you today about something I'm particularly passionate about, and that's the sales process. But in particular, I want to talk to you about a stage of that process, and that is the discovery meeting. Now, in a few moments' time, I'll describe to you what I mean by discovery meeting as part of the sales process. But to begin with, I just want to put this into context as to why I want to talk about this today. So there is a stat in this book here, Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play, which, if I'm being perfectly honest, I've been dining out on for about the last 3 or 4 years, ever since I saw it in there. And the stat is that 80% of lost sales opportunities are the result of a lack of an adequate or non-existing qualifying or sales process. Now, recently, the Wow Company, if you haven't heard of the Wow Company, they are an accountancy firm for agencies here in the UK. Each year, they publish what they call their bench press report. So this is where they survey a few thousand agencies and they ask questions on everything ranging from finance, operations, how much agency principals are paying themselves, and an area of which, of course, I'm particularly interested in is around business development. And there were a few stats that came out of that which I think help to reinforce what I've always thought is a slightly anecdotal stat in here, but one which actually, I think when you apply these stats to it, actually brings it to life. In the most recent bench press report, just 17% of agencies are converting 61% or more of their proposals. Almost 50% of agencies are converting less than 41% of their proposals. As an industry, I think we accept average, and I would consider those stats to be average. I think we accept average as being good, whereas I firmly believe that an agency should be converting at 60, 70%. Now, that leads us naturally to the question, how do we increase that conversion rate? And I think whilst that question is the right one to ask, I often find when I'm speaking with agencies that actually the diagnosis is incorrect. So what I mean by that is the temptation tends to be, okay, well, let's have a look at our proposal. Let's have a look at the pitch deck. Let's analyze in detail what happened at the actual pitch meeting. And you might start thinking, okay, well, maybe our deck needs to be redesigned. Maybe the structure of the presentation wasn't right. Maybe the 40 about us slides was a slight overkill. Maybe they didn't like our wacky idea. Now, some of that may be true. And there are cases where actually you just cocked up the proposal, you cocked up the pitch meeting, and that may well be the reason why the opportunity was lost. But I actually believe firmly that it's everything that happens or potentially doesn't happen leading up to the proposal or leading up to the pitch meeting, which really makes the difference. The problem is, though, when both parties, both the agency and the prospect, are so eager to get to the money shot, or the proposal in other words, that often vital steps and key conversations unfortunately are bypassed. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. One of the most vital but often kind of mismanaged stage of the sales process is the discovery meeting. So we're going to briefly look at, to provide a bit of context, how sales and selling has changed over the years. I'm going to look a little bit at some of the mistakes commonly that agencies make when they approach that discovery meeting. I'm also going to look at how do you actually create value and, believe it or not, loyalty, customer loyalty, as a direct result of how you manage the sales process, and in particular those discovery meetings, by helping your prospects see around corners, by sharing insight. And then just to finish off, I'll just provide a few practical tips on how you can best approach, how you prepare, how you run, and how you follow up discovery meetings. So before we get into that, let's just define what we mean by the discovery meeting, just to clarify what we mean by that. Typically speaking, it's probably going to be the second stage of your sales process. It's going to be the second conversation you have. Let's imagine you've had a lead come into you. You will probably do initial bit of sort of desk research just to see how they broadly fit, whether it's the type of prospect that you should engage with. You would then probably have an initial kind of, if you like, screening type call where you're just giving them a bell. You're looking to understand, broadly speaking, what kind of fit there, what they're looking for, why they've approached you specifically as an agency. And if they, if you like, sort of pass that test, you would then agree to progress to a second sort of discovery style meeting. This is where you are looking to build a broader, more detailed view of what is happening in their world, of their current situation, of what they're looking to do, of the challenges they're facing, what they're looking to achieve, etc., etc. Now, to provide a little bit of context as to why you might need to change your approach to how you currently manage those discovery meetings, I just wanted to give a brief kind of history lesson, if you like, with regards to how sales and how selling as a discipline has changed over the years. Now, believe it or not, there was a time when the internet did not exist. When I left school at 18, we had one PC in our library, this honking great white massive plastic that nobody used, nobody knew what it did. When I got to university later on that year in 2007, the internet was still fairly new. Hotmail, do you remember Hotmail? Hotmail was my gateway to the internet. That was my first experience of going online, writing an email, sending a message to somebody. So if we go back that sort of 20, 25 years, and we put that in the context of sales and selling, the salesperson had, and this is what I picked up from reading another great book on sales, Daniel Pink, To Sell is Human. The salesperson had what was called an information advantage. So if you were going to go and buy anything, virtually anything, you probably needed to rely on a salesperson to provide you with the information you needed to understand how that product or service worked. Now, when you add money into the equation, or commission in this sense, it's no real surprise that, bearing in mind the salesperson held that advantage, that it created certain behaviors, certain traits in salespeople where, let's be honest, they were slightly manipulative and sort of self-serving. Thus, the conditions were set, unfortunately, for sales and selling to get a bit of a bad rep. I'm not saying all salespeople 30 years ago were bad eggs, but there were certainly some that either knowingly or unknowingly took advantage of that information advantage that they held over the customer. So selling was very much something that was, if you like, being done to somebody rather than for them and rather than with them. Now, the age of the internet has brought around fundamental changes in that. It's highly likely, if we think about this in an agency context, that when a prospect approaches your agency, they've already done some research. They've been on your website. They've downloaded some content. Maybe they've also seen you offline speaking at an event, for example. They've got quite a good picture through their own research of what you are all about as an agency. They can effectively educate themselves without really needing to speak to anybody whatsoever. Now, that doesn't make the role of the salesperson redundant, but it does make the role slightly different. And it also means that the salesperson no longer holds that information advantage that we were talking about earlier on, because information, of course, is plentiful across the internet. So that person can go out, educate themselves, and make quite an informed decision about what it is they think they want and the type of agencies they might want to work with. If we also go back and think about some of the sales techniques over the years as well, if we think about things such as BANT, if we think about techniques such as spin, whilst if used carefully, today still very much have their place. But I think the problem with some of these techniques is that they very much promote this idea of a kind of a fact-finding mission on behalf of the salesperson, and in particular to the discovery meeting. The aim being very much to kind of identify problems and then go away and align a solution to that. Now you might say, what's wrong with that? That's sales, isn't it? We discover a problem, we align a solution to it. And often there's nothing wrong with those approaches at all. They still work very well. You have to understand and build a picture of a prospect's current position and situation, understanding objectives and pain points and outcomes, and so on and so on. But I think actually the value of that type of approach has diminished over time. And there's a reason for that. And I think it's because if you are an experienced leader or buyer, you have sat in 100 discovery style meetings where the salesperson is asking you the same types of questions over and over and over again. They don't necessarily need another discovery meeting to uncover problems that they're potentially already aware of. So I think that's one way in which some of these techniques may still apply, but equally may longer be quite as relevant as they once were. So with the ever increasing array of choice, if you like, on behalf of the buyer, with an extremely complex world to navigate, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later on as well, I think the role of the salesperson has changed. And also the skills and the attributes that we associate with the modern salesperson, I think, has also changed. This word consultative is bandied around an awful lot, in my opinion. And I think there's a lot of salespeople that would describe themselves as consultative, and I'm not necessarily sure they are if we apply the true sense of the word to consultative. I believe that truly consultative means a number of different things. It means that you are playing the role of a trusted advisor as part of the sales process. It means that you are willing and able to challenge a prospect's assumptions. It means that you need to share good quality insight and reveal new things, new opportunities, new ideas to the prospect as part of that process. And ultimately, what it really means in today's world is you are responsible for helping a prospect navigate change. That means that the sales process sees you demonstrate that you already have a good understanding of the problems that a prospect is facing. Because if you are a well-positioned agency focused on a particular type of client, segment of the market or a sector, you've seen these problems time and time and time again. And what it means actually you need to be doing is opening the prospect's eyes to the root cause of those problems rather than just talking about the surface level problems which are visible for all to see. It means you're going to want to offer unique and valuable insights on their market. It means you're going to want to help them see around corners. And again, I'll touch on what I mean by that in a little bit more detail in a moment. It means you need to offer advice or recommendations that go beyond just the product or service that you're talking about that might be part of their brief. For me, this is what it means to be truly consultative. It has the potential to, first and foremost, offer significant value to the prospect as part of the process before they actually become a client. And it also has the opportunity to provide you with a significant competitive advantage versus the other agencies they might be speaking to. So that's what we mean by sort of consultative. And I think that kind of nicely shapes what a good discovery meeting looks like. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few moments' time. But let's just have a look at a few mistakes that I see agencies make when it comes to that discovery meeting in itself. Typically what happens when I look at an agency's sales process and how they manage that meeting, at its worst, it tends to be a cred style meeting. So in other words, the agency walks in, they get the laptop out, and they start talking about themselves for half an hour. They start talking through a whole load of information which is available on the website anyway, making the whole exercise pretty pointless, certainly from the prospect's point of view. It offers very little value for a prospect to be sit there and spoken at for half an hour, relaying information which they may have already seen on the website anyway. Or maybe the agency takes it a step further and they do ask questions, but the questions are really scripted. I've been on the end of somebody who was working me through the sort of spin questioning methodology, and they were unable to step outside of it. It was a highly scripted conversation. When I was unable to answer a particular question, I think it was around the implication of me not doing something, which is the I in spin. He wouldn't move on. He kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me. And I didn't know the answer to the question, but he didn't know how to react and adjust and step outside of that. So it created a highly awkward conversation, if I'm being quite honest. So using those aforementioned techniques in a really scripted way, that might be another mistake that agencies make. Or they ask questions that demonstrate they've done little or no research whatsoever. As a general rule of thumb, you should not ask a question in a discovery meeting whereby if you did a bit of research, you could have found out the answer to that particular question. Or they only ask questions which are very narrow in focus. So if the brief is about SEO, the questions are very specific, narrow about SEO, and they're not seeking to explore more broadly what's happening in that business and how SEO fits in the context, if you like, with respect to how it fits into the rest of the business. As I've kind of hopefully made clear, I don't believe that any of these approaches really offer much value to a relatively experienced buyer or leader as part of the process. Neither do they in this day and age create any real advantage for you compared to other agencies they may be speaking to, and neither do they lay the foundations for creating any sense of customer loyalty. Hold on a minute. What does customer loyalty have to do with the sales process? Surely loyalty is created through the experience once they become a client, based on the performance of your product or services, based on the customer service you provide, based on the perceived value that they're getting versus the price they're paying for your services. Not so, according to The Challenger Sale, another book I firmly recommend that you read. A study from The Challenger Sale found that the sales process can be the greatest driver of customer loyalty. I'm just going to read the quote directly from the book with respect to this. And it said that the lion's share of customer loyalty is attributable to your ability to outperform the competition in the sales experience itself, to provide information so interesting and valuable that the customer would have been willing to pay for that conversation. So I've always felt that the sales process in itself can be a creator of competitive advantage for your agency. So you can imagine my delight when reading this book and finding that actually they did a study and found that that is very much the case. It can be a key driver of that customer loyalty. So how do we create loyalty? How do we create value? How do we create that advantage as part of the sales process? The answer for me lies in the insight that you are sharing during the sales process, and in particular, during this discovery meeting. When we talk about the discovery meeting, it should be two-way. So what I mean by that is, yes, through the quality of your questioning, you are discovering new things about the prospect that you didn't know before. But on the flip side, the prospect is also learning things that they didn't know prior to coming to that meeting. Now, we touched on this a few moments ago, but it feels like there is a huge amount of uncertainty in the world right now than certainly any other point that I can remember. If we think about the aftershocks of the pandemic, if we think about the war in Ukraine, if we think about over in the UK anyway, the cost of living crisis we're experiencing at the moment, and the threat of or potentially already being in recession. And this much uncertainty in the world creates uncertainty and hesitation in prospects making decisions. There is much less risk in just doing nothing at all. There is greater certainty in simply maintaining the status quo rather than investing in a new product or service or moving to a new agency. And this is the key thing we have to remember when it comes to sales and selling. Irrespective of what it is you are actually selling, irrespective of your products or services, fundamentally what you are selling is change. And change is hard, change is scary, change can be highly uncomfortable. So your biggest competitor in any sales situation is not necessarily the other agencies in the mix, but it's actually the status quo. It's actually the client's willingness just to carry on doing what they're doing right now, even if that thing isn't working quite as well, because it's easier to do that than it is to take a risk or potentially a punt in their view on a new product, a new service, a new agency, and so on. And that's why, if we go back to the classic mistake that agencies make, that's why cred style presentation so often ends up with things going no further. Why would a prospect consider changing, taking a risk, doing something new, doing something different, based on a one-way conversation where you stand up and just talk about yourselves for half an hour, trying to make the case that your agency is better than the other ones they're speaking to? Trust me, they've heard it all before. So consultative selling, on the other hand, relies on you knowing as much, if not more, about your prospect's world than they do. It means that they discover something new about themselves, about the business, about their market as part of this process. What we're really looking for ideally is the prospect to have that aha moment, where you've helped them kind of experience a bit of a paradigm shift in their thinking. Because without that shift, without that paradigm shift, they have no real reason to change. And what tends to happen is, of course, they go dark. You have the meeting, you try and follow up, they disappear. You end up chasing them for weeks or months on end. You become frustrated and you give up and you move on to the next opportunity. And that, for me, is down to how you failed to manage effectively that discovery meeting to create that case for change, if you like, and position yourself ultimately as the salesperson or business developer, whatever you want to call yourself, that can guide them through that journey. That is the role of a consultative salesperson, in my view. So with that in mind, just a few quick tips to finish up on how you can prepare, how you can run, and how you can follow up your discovery meetings with greater effect. First of all, always agree an agenda for a discovery style meeting. You want to make sure that both of you are really clear on where you want to be come the end of this meeting. So you may well put together an agenda that describes the key things you are looking to understand, or maybe some teaser to maybe some of the insights you're looking to share. The important thing is, make sure you ask the recipient to add to that agenda. Make sure you're really clear on what they want to get out of the meeting as well. When you actually get to that meeting, you might well be meeting a number of new stakeholders for the first time. If you've done a good job at understanding which stakeholders should be involved, hopefully they are going to be coming along to this discovery meeting. You need to gain and keep people's attention, especially if you're running meetings virtually where people are on the other end of a video. So there's a key question you can ask of each person to open up the meeting, and it's this: if at the end of the meeting you thought this was now well spent, what would we have covered? And you want to make sure that each of the people within the meeting is answering that question directly, so you can ensure that whatever they want to get from the meeting, whatever they want to know, whatever they want to understand, you can directly address that point and address that person when you come to it at that stage of the meeting. It's probably quite clear now, point number 3, that I'm not a big fan of creds decks. So put them away. You don't need them. You don't need a set of slides to run an effective discovery meeting. This was reflected, there was a US study done by a new biz agency a little while ago called RSW. They discovered that 73% of marketers said that agencies talk too much about themselves in those early stage sales meetings. So even if you are politely asked to present your creds, push back. What you might do is ask them instead, what information would you like to see at this stage to determine whether we might be a good fit for you, so that anything you do share is relevant and specific, rather than talking them through a load of slides with information that is already available on the website and maybe frankly irrelevant to the conversation. Instead, what you want to be doing is trying to lead that meeting with your insights. So just to provide you with a few examples of what those insights might actually be, what you might do is explain a big change that you think is coming over the horizon in their market. It's an informed opinion, if you like, on how you think the prospects landscape is changing. You might also present some key trends in their sector that you believe are going to impact their business over the coming months and years. You might do something where you attack what's called attacking the old game. So you might explore the prospect's current approach to doing something and show that the winners in their world are doing something new. They are playing a new game. Now, of course, that new game is your game. Or it might be as simple as some discipline-related trends or developments. So how AI is going to affect SEO, for example, if you're going to be quite specific. Now, it probably goes without saying that this is all linked to positioning. If you have narrow positioning, if you do a specific thing for a specific audience, you are going to be much better equipped to having built up this knowledge, built up these insights, and built up these expertise over time. If you're a generalist doing anything for everyone, you're going to find it a lot more difficult to lead a discovery type meeting with those insights. So that's worth just having to think about. Finally, only ask questions where the information is not publicly available. In the past, salespeople needed to be adept at answering questions because they had that information advantage that we talked about earlier on. These days, they need to be good at asking questions, but asking the right kind of questions. We should not be asking questions about things that we can go away and research ourselves. What we're really trying to do is get under the skin of the client and understand the root cause of the problems that they're facing, because ultimately, that's what they need help in fixing. And then just the final tip is just summarize regularly and agree the next step at the end of that meeting. So you might say something like during the course of the meeting, so just to summarize, have I understood that correctly, or am I missing something? And you might do that at regular points during the course of the meeting. At the end, you might say something like, can I just take a moment to check that I've got all the information I need? And if you haven't, ask the remaining question to make sure you've got everything on your list. And then agree the next step. And really importantly, don't assume that the next step is to create a written proposal. Any proposal you put together should be collaborative. In other words, it should be a joint effort between you and the prospect. So what I'd recommend doing with that in mind is that you always have a pre-proposal check-in call. So what I mean by that is before you actually put your proposal together, but you've got the bare bones of your 2 or 3 ideas or solutions, or whatever that may look like, is you give them a call and say, right, having sat down with the team, this is the shape of the proposal, this is the direction of travel, what do you think? So you're getting their buy-in before you go away and put too much work into that proposal or pitch deck. Now, as a final point on this, it's worth saying that things may not go further after this discovery meeting. You and the prospect may agree for whatever reason that actually the timing or the fit is not quite right. That does not make this meeting a waste of time. It can often take months, sometimes years, after a discovery style meeting before that prospect is actually ready to buy. So I think it's about having a mindset that this is just the beginning. It might take 2 or 3 further meetings in the next few weeks. It might take 2 or 3 further meetings in the next couple of years before this prospect actually turns into a real life opportunity. But every discovery type meeting is an opportunity to learn, to improve, and to get better. So please don't see these discovery meetings as a waste of time if they don't progress. So just to finish up and summarize sort of 3 or 4 key points, which I hope you're going to take away from today. The discovery meeting is a conversation where both you and, importantly, the prospect are going to learn something new. You are looking to build a broader, more detailed picture of their situation, but you're only doing that by asking questions where the information isn't already available in the public sphere. And if you take that approach, the blend of the right questions and the insight that you can share, it should provoke new thoughts, new ideas, new possibilities in the mind of the prospect. And that's the paradigm shift you're looking for that is going to drive real change. So a closing question. I'm not going to lay claim to this question. I've stolen it again from the Challenger sale, but I'd like you to go away and think about one thing. Would a prospect be willing to pay for a discovery meeting with you? If not, what could you share as part of that discovery meeting that would make the conversation you have with them so interesting and so valuable that they would? Now, I'm not suggesting you're going to go away and start charging for your discovery meetings, although I think actually in a lot of instances, agencies should do that. But just in principle, why would a prospect pay for that time? Would they be willing to pay for that time? So I hope you found that useful in understanding how, for me anyway, the sales process has changed, how I believe you should be approaching discovery meetings in a more consultative way. My name is Ben Potter. You can find me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect with me. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your time.
If you enjoyed watching this video, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you can stay up to date whenever we publish a new masterclass. Remember, our sponsor, The Advertist, is your survival toolkit for the world of new business and business development, and that's how we're able to bring you all these wonderful talks from such amazing talent. So we'll see you next time on the New Business Masterclass. I've been a Smith called Keith, and I wish you happy prospecting. Bye for now.